The room went quiet when I dragged the chair away from the coat pile. You could hear the football game on TV pause, the clink of forks midair. My mom's smile froze as she said, "You don't mind standing, right?" And that's when I sat somewhere else, somewhere no one expected, and everything started to unravel. Before you judge me, before you decide whose side you'd be on, let me take you back. Because this wasn't really about a chair. It was about 32 years of being treated like I didn't quite belong in my own family. And if you were in my shoes, honestly, what would you have done? Thanksgiving had always been complicated in our house. You know how some families have traditions that feel warm and comforting? Ours had traditions too, but they came with rules, unspoken ones. Rules about who mattered most, who got praised, and who quietly picked up the slack. That who was usually me. I'm the oldest, the reliable one, the one who showed up early to help cook, stayed late to clean, and somehow always ended up on the edge of photos. My younger brother, Evan, was the golden child. Everyone said it out loud like it was a joke, but jokes repeated long enough turn into truth. Evan's just special, my mom would say, like that explained everything. Special meant he could show up late. Special meant he forgot birthdays but still got gifts. Special meant his mistakes were learning experiences, while mine were disappointments. But this Thanksgiving, something felt different the moment I walked through the door. The air smelled like turkey and cinnamon candles, but there was tension under it, like static before a storm. My Aunt Linda hugged me a little too quickly. My dad wouldn't quite meet my eyes. And my mom was hovering. "You made it," she said, smiling wide. Too wide. "Coats can go on that chair." She pointed to the chair at the end of the dining table, the one that was technically a chair, but no one ever actually sat in. I didn't think much of it at first. I took off my jacket, added it to the pile, and went to help in the kitchen like always. But when it was time to sit down, that's when it happened. Everyone took their places. Evan slid into his seat next to my mom, laughing about something on his phone. His girlfriend, who he'd been dating for maybe 3 months, got a seat. My cousin's new fiancé got a seat. Even Uncle Rob, who no one actually liked, had a seat. I stood there, looking at the table, then at the chair buried under coats. I laughed a little, thinking it was a mistake. "Hey, where do you want me?" My mom didn't miss a beat. She gestured at the coat chair and smiled that tight smile. "Oh, we're a little cramped. You don't mind standing, right? Or we can grab you a plate after." After. Like I was a guest waiting to be scraps. You could feel it, right? That sinking feeling in your chest when you realize no one's joking, when this is actually happening. I looked around the table, waiting for someone, anyone, to say something. My dad stared at his hands. My aunt suddenly found the gravy fascinating. Evan didn't even look up. And that's when something inside me snapped. Quietly. Cleanly. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just said, "Okay." And then I dragged the chair out from under the coats. You should have seen my mom's face. Shock, then irritation, then that familiar warning look. The one that said, "Don't embarrass me." But I wasn't done. Instead of sitting in the empty space at the table, I picked up my plate, walked across the room, and sat down in my dad's armchair, the one he always said was his spot. The TV remote was still warm. "I'll sit here," I said calmly. You could have heard a pin drop. "That's Dad's chair," my mom said sharply. I looked at my dad. "You mind?" He hesitated, just for a second. Then he shrugged. "No, I guess not." And that was the moment I realized something important. This wasn't just about favoritism. This was about control. And I had just broken the pattern. But trust me, this was only the beginning. Growing up, I learned early that love in our family came with conditions. Be helpful. Be agreeable. Don't make waves. My mom liked to say, "We don't air dirty laundry," which was funny because she was usually the one throwing it around. Evan and I were only 2 years apart, but you'd think we were raised in different houses. When I got a B+, my mom asked why it wasn't an A. When Evan barely passed, she threw him a celebration dinner. When I worked 2 jobs in college, it was responsible. When Evan dropped out for a semester, it was finding himself. I told myself it didn't bother me. I told myself I was stronger because of it. But little things add up. Like the time my mom borrowed money from my savings to help Evan with rent, without asking. Or when she forgot to tell me about a family vacation until the day before. Or when she introduced me to people as, "This is my daughter. She's very independent." Translation, she doesn't need us. And here's the thing. You don't wake up one day suddenly resentful. It builds, quietly, like water behind a dam. Now here's where the story takes a turn, and you might want to lean in for this. Because while everyone thought I was just the overlooked daughter, I had been seeing things they hadn't. About a year before that Thanksgiving, my grandmother passed away. She was my dad's mom, tough, sharp, and quietly observant. She used to squeeze my hand and whisper, "You see more than they think." At the reading of her will, most of the estate went to my dad. That was expected. But there was one small clause no one paid much attention to. Except me. She left me her old house. Not outright. It was put into a trust. My name was on it, mine alone. But the condition was simple. I had to live there for a year before I could sell or rent it. I didn't tell anyone. Why? Because I knew what would happen. It would become the family house. Evan would need it. My mom would manage it. And I'd disappear from the conversation. So I stayed quiet. I moved in, fixed it up slowly, paid the taxes, learned the paperwork, learned how trusts worked, learned something else too. Independence is power when no one sees it coming. Here's the part you won't believe. 3 months before Thanksgiving, my mom called me, frantic. "Sweetheart," she said, voice shaking, "we might lose the house." Their house, the one I grew up in. Turns out, Evan had convinced them to co-sign a business loan, a sure thing. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. He defaulted. The bank was circling. My parents were panicking. "What do we do?" my mom asked. I remember sitting in my kitchen, staring at the peeling paint I'd fixed with my own hands. "I'm not sure," I said carefully. "What's the plan?" She hesitated. "Well, we were hoping maybe you could help. You're always so responsible." There it was. I asked one question. "What about Evan?" Silence. "He's dealing with a lot right now." Of course he was. I told her I'd think about it. And that's when I started preparing, quietly, strategically. Because here's the truth. They didn't just underestimate me. They forgot to see me entirely. And when people don't see you, they don't see you coming. Back to Thanksgiving. After I sat in my dad's chair, dinner resumed, awkwardly. Forks scraped plates. Someone laughed too loud. My mom kept glancing at me like I was a ticking bomb. Halfway through the meal, she cleared her throat. "So," she said brightly, "we wanted to make an announcement." "Oh, you know that feeling when your stomach drops before anything even happens?" I felt it. Evan sat up straighter, suddenly interested. My mom clasped her hands. "Evan is moving back home for a bit, to get back on his feet." Back on his feet, again. "And," she continued, "we've decided to refinance the house. It's going to be tight, but family helps family." She looked straight at me. I took a slow breath. "That's a big decision." "Well," she said, smile strained, "we assumed you'd be okay pitching in, since you don't have kids, or obligations." Obligations. I felt every eye on me. "Tell me, what would you have said in that moment?" I set my fork down. "Actually," I said calmly, "I do have obligations." My mom frowned. "To what?" I smiled. Not wide, not fake, just enough. To myself. The room went silent again. That's when I stood up. Yeah, you guessed it. And said something I'd been holding in for years. But before I tell you what I said, you need to understand one more thing. I had leverage. And they had no idea. 2 weeks ago, I'd met with a lawyer. A good one. The kind who doesn't talk much but listens hard. He'd looked over the trust documents, the bank letters, the loan paperwork my mom had emailed me in a panic. Then he leaned back and said, "You know you're not responsible for any of this, right?" I nodded. "I know." He raised an eyebrow. But he looked at him. "Funny coming from you." My dad finally spoke. "Enough." "No," I said softly. "Actually, it's not." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Thick, organized, labeled. "I need you all to listen, because this affects everyone." My mom's voice shook. "What is that?" "Information," I said. The kind you should have asked me 4 years ago. And then I laid it all out. The trust, the house, the protection, the fact that I would not be using it to bail Evan out again, the fact that I would not be co-signing anything, the fact that their plan, assuming my silence and compliance, was over. My mom started crying. Real tears this time. How could you do this to us? I swallowed hard. You mean, how could I finally do something for myself? Evan stood up. This is unbelievable. You're right, I said. It is. Because here came the twist. I'm willing to help, I said, but not the way you think. They all leaned in. I'll buy the house. My mom gasped. You can't. I can, I said, and I will. At market value. Enough to clear the debt, enough to start fresh. My dad stared at me. And then what? Then you decide what kind of relationship you want with me, I said, because it won't be built on guilt anymore. You could feel the shift. The power had changed hands. Evan laughed bitterly. So this is payback? I shook my head. No, this is boundaries. And here's the thing. Boundaries feel like betrayal to people who benefited from you having none. They didn't answer that night. Thanksgiving ended early. People left quietly. Hugs were stiff. My mom didn't speak to me on the way out. But the next morning, my phone buzzed. It was my dad. Can we talk? He asked. We met for coffee. Just the two of us. No interruptions. He looked older, tired. I should have stepped in sooner, he said. I didn't. I know. I want you to know, he said. I'm proud of you. That was the first time he'd ever said it. They accepted my offer a week later. We signed papers. The house changed hands. Evan moved out, angry, resentful, blaming everyone but himself. My mom struggled, not with money, with control. Our relationship is different now, healthier, but distant. And me? I sold the house 6 months later. I paid off my mom debts. I traveled. I slept without guilt for the first time in my life. I learned something important. You can love people without sacrificing yourself. You can walk away without being cruel. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose a different chair. So tell me, would you have stood there politely? Or would you have sat somewhere else, like I did? Because once you do, there's no going back.